Hello guys, am I audible to you all? Please say yes in the comment. Hello. So welcome everyone. Thank you for each one of you for being here with us today. My name is Adil and I am from Pakistan. This webinar is divided into three parts. In the first part, we will conduct the webinar, and the webinar is about theory of impersonality and T.S. Eliot's poetry, a critical study. And then in the second part, we will conduct the question and answer session where you will ask the questions from the speakers. And in the last part, I will share the link of the feedback form which you have to fill in order to get certificate. So please connect, be with here with us till the end so that you can get the certificate. Now I would like to welcome the speaker. Hello, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Sir, please introduce yourself to the audience.
So, am I audible rightly?
Yes, sir. You are absolutely.
Okay. So, hello everyone. I am Dr. Bipin Bihari Dash from India. So, at the outset, from the core of my heart, I welcome to all the dignitaries and the participants to the World Literature Webinar. And from the deep sense of gratitude, I also thanks to Adil Khan Bhatt, who is the founder and director of the World Literature Webinar, who has invited me, who has given me a chance to present over here. So I'm really thankful to you also. And let's enjoy the day. So at the outset, let's start with my introduction about my educational qualification, my research experience, and etc. So far, my educational qualification is concerned, I did MA, MPhil, PhD in English from different universities of Odisha in India. In addition to this, I did MA in linguistics from one of the University of Odisha in India. So regarding my research works, I published 4 books to my credit. In addition to this, I contributed 7 chapters for the edited books as well as 32 research articles to international English journals. So far, and also, however, in addition to this, I have also presented many seminar papers, conferences. So this is all about me. And currently, I work at Odisha University of Technology and Research, Bhubaneswar, Odisha, India. I am working in a technical institution in which around 5,000 students are studying. So that is all about my introduction, my qualification, my experience. So, in today's session, I am going to present the topic Theory of Impersonality in T.S. Eliot's Poetry, a Critical Study. So, let's welcome to all of you. Come to the first slide.
Yes, sir. I'm going to share the slides.
Okay. So, this is the first slide that Unis. Welcome to the World Literature Webinar presented on Theory of Impersonality in T.S. Eliot's Poetry, a Critical Study. This is my area of presentation, Theory of Impersonality in T.S. Eliot's Poetry, a Critical Study. Please come to the second. Okay, so in this slide, I have to discuss the objectives of the webinar. So whenever we are going to present a paper, wherever, there must be some certain objectives. So here, my objective is to establish T.S. Eliot as a literary person, as a great literary figure in the world. He is popularly known as a critic, poet, and critic all over the world. So, in the first part, I will discuss about the introduction to T.S. Eliot. I will discuss very briefly about T.S. Eliot, biography, literary career, his achievements, and etc. In the next part, I will discuss about chief characteristics of modern poetry. You know that T.S. Eliot belongs to the 20th century poetry. He belongs to the modern age. So whenever we are going to study about T.S. Eliot, we have to study about the modern poetry, chief character of modern poetry. This is inevitable, essential, and indispensable of a literary student. So we will discuss very carefully and critically about the characteristics of modern poetry. Then after we have to come to the contribution of T.S. Eliot to literature. So we all of us know that T.S. Eliot has given a tremendous effort, tremendous contribution to English literature. So we have to discuss about his literary arena. He has contributed his time for poetry, drama, criticism, as well as social essays he has contributed. Then we have to come about achievements of T.S. Eliot as a poet. As a poet, how he has placed himself in the worldwide, how the people have recognized, how the different critics have been appreciated, how the scholars, researchers, and academicians appreciate his works, and what is his achievement in the world literature. We all of us know that T.S. Eliot has received the Nobel Prize in 1948 for the literature, for his best contribution for literature, outstanding contribution for the literature. So next part, we have to come to the theory of impersonality of poetry. We know that Eliot has contributed three theories. One is unification of sensibility, objective of correlativity, and theory of impersonality of poetry. So unification of sensibility, in that case, he has present, he has opposed in the that is the poetry of metaphysical poets, that he say metaphysical poets say dissociation of sensibility, and he said that unification of sensibility, union of sense, thought, and emotion. And the next one is objective of correlativity. Objective of correlativity, that is taken from Hamlet and his problem in his essay. But my area of research, my area of presentation is theory of impersonality of poetry. That is my area. So I will discuss very carefully theory of impersonality of poetry. And this term he has taken from his critical essay, The Tradition of Individual Talent. That one, that term is taken there. Then we have to discuss about major works of T.S. Eliot poetry. We will critically discuss about, we will specifically, categorically discuss about his poetry, how he has developed his poetry career. He has spent a lot of time for the poetry. Though he has an eminent position in drama, critic, essays, social essays, reviews, and editor as a columnist, but still then he has a specific place in the history of English literature. Then we have to discuss unselected poems. As he has contributed many poems to the English literature, it is not possible to discuss all the poems in one session. So that is why I have selected some of the poems to discuss before you. Then finally, I will come to the conclusion. In the conclusion, that what I have found it in my research or what I have found in my presentation, I have concluded it or some of it. Then I have given at the end of the presentation, I have given there is a bibliography, the list of the books that will help you to the next researchers, next scholars, or the students, those who are interested, those who are doing the work, or those who are appearing the exams, as well as those who are doing the research works. That bibliography will help to them. This is all about the second slide or the objectives of the webinar. So now you come to the next slide, that is all about T.S. Eliot's, the details about the T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot was born in 1888. He was died in 1965. So he spent 77 years for us. So now you see that what was his occupation? In occupation, he was a poet, critic, essayist, playwright, and publisher. So citizenship, he was born in America, born and brought up in America, but he made his literary, most of the literary career in Britain. That is why he has taken his citizenship in two parts. From 1888 to 1927, American citizenship, and then 1927 to 1965, that is British citizenship. So he has divided his time into two countries. One is America and the British. So mostly or widely, he is also known in America as well as in British. Then the literary period, he started writing 1905 and up to 1965. So during this period, he has contributed immensely to the field of English literature. So around 60 years he has spent for literature, 1905 to 1965. Then you come to the literary movements. So he belongs to the modernism. You know that after the W.H. received the Nobel Prize in 1923, he was an Irish poet. And after that, the world got a new poet, new innovative poet, that is T.S. Eliot. He belongs to the modernism period. So after the W.H., we say that T.S. Eliot is the renowned poet in all over the world. We say that. So he belongs to the modernism period, 20th century. So what is modernism? It is a style or movement in the art that aims to depart significantly from classical and traditional forms. By the post-war period, modernism had become part of art history. So modernism, this is the one, this definition was given by me. The next one is notable works of poetry. What are the notable works he has contributed for poetry? So the notable works are the Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, 1915. So from that poet, T.S. Eliot is well known to all over the world. That is a long poem that is written in 133 lines, and from which he is very, very popular. The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, which is published in the Prufrock and Other Observations in 1917 in that volume. That is a major work. Then after the Westland, which is published in 1922, it is written in 434 lines. This poem is written in 434 lines, and which is usually it is accepted all over the world. We can also say that it is an modern epic poem. Then after the Hollow Man, that is published in 1925. The most of the critics, they say that the Hollow Man can be written as an epilogue to the Westland, because both the poems are related to the post-war period. You know that the First World War started in 1914 to 1918, and after that, these two poems came into the limelight. That is Westland 1922 and the Hollow Man 1925. So then after, at the last part of his career, he has written a long poem, that is a 4 quartets. This poem consists of 4 parts. 4 parts: Burnt Mutton, East Coker, Little Gidding, and the Dry Salvages. 4 quarters. It is written in different sections and different years, but published unanimously in 1943. So this is a philosophical and a religious poem. So then we come to the notable works of drama. This is not my uh, included on my area of research or area of present, but still, then, as he's a great poet, I would love to mention his great works. He's a vast dramatist. He has written 4 dramas to his credit, the most important 4 dramas. One is Murder in the Cathedral, 1935, The Family Reunion, 1939, The Cocktail Party, 1950, The Confidential Clerk, 1954. Then after, he is also known as a notable critical works. He is not only popular in a poet as well as dramatist, but also as a literary work or critical works, literary essays. So to his credit, he has written Tradition and Individual Talent, Poetry and Drama, The Function of Criticism, The English Metaphysical Poets, The Frontiers of Criticism, The Use of Poetry and the Use of Criticism, On Poetry and Poets, To Criticize the Critic. Then, notable awards. What are the notable awards he received? I have already told you that he received Nobel Prize in Literature in the year 1948 for his outstanding pioneer contribution to present-day poetry. In the same year, he also received the British Order of Merit 1940. So 1948 is a golden year for T.S. Eliot. So this is all about this slide. So now we discuss about the chief characteristics of modern poetry. We know that T.S. Eliot belongs to the modern age, 20th century poetry. So in the modern age, what are the important features? The important features are, first one, a study of complex psychological aspects of life. Modern age is not a simple time. It is not the age of the simple era. It is a age of complex. The people are in a difficult time, dilemma, confusion, and also people are in a struggling stage. That is a complex stage. Psychological aspects, everybody is psychologically struggling. So you know that, as we know that literature is the mirror of society. Literature is the reflection of the society. Literature is the reflection of the lives. Since literature is the description of the human being's life, same to say that, that is to say that, as the life is the very complex and psychological, obviously the discussion of poetry is very complex and also psychological. Then you come to the diverse variety of themes. Here in this era, the poets write about different types of themes. But prior to that, the people or the poets were writing in a specific subject, specific theme. For example, in romantic age, the people writing about the love of nature, mysticism, suspense, they were writing. But in this era, the poets write about different themes. Theme about the nature, theme about the modernism, theme about the society, theme of the effect of the world war, industrialization, mechanism of life, and pollution, or you say that environmental issues, or different issues they can write, different variety of themes they write in the 20th century. Then third one is an analysis of humanitarian and democratic note. This is as the people are very much conscious in this era in 20th century, the humanitarian, to respect to the human beings, the ethical background, the poets write about the ethical, morality, and religious background of the people, as well as the democratic feelings they wrote. And the fourth one is an interpretation of multiple facets of modern poetry. Modern poetry mixed up. It is mixed of allusive, compressed, comprehensive, direct, disciplined, and suggestive. So let me discuss at least one. So T.S. Eliot has used so many allusions in his poetry. As for example, in his first, the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, he has used three allusions: Lazarus, or you say that Platter, or you say that Prince Hamlet. He has given these three examples, allusions he has. In the Westland is full of allusions, full of allusions. There is a indirect references are there. There are different mixture of very, very important things there he has written. Also, myths, legends, imagery, symbolism, etc. He has introduced in that poem. So modern poetry is full of all these things. Then next, you come to the application of new technique and innovation, influenced by arts, music, painting, sculpture, free use of vocabulary, free verse form. So generally, people write or the poets write about rhyme verse, blank verse, they write. But here, the poets got the freedom to write. They write generally about the free verse. They write in prosaic style. They can choose any vocabulary they can use. They are free to use the vocabulary. And they get the idea from the arts, music, painting, as well as sculpture. They can get ideas from different sources. The 20th century, the modern poetry is full of pessimism and disillusion. So there is no question of optimism. They are always struggling. The poets, the human beings are always struggling because the world is facing two wars, First World War and Second World War. So the whole world is facing a struggle. So there is a question of, there is always pessimism, there is a disillusion, disappointment. So poetry is all the poetries are the reflection of the society. That is why the poets write about the note of pessimism and the disappointment. Then next to the point, introduction to realism and symbolism. They use also symbolism, different symbolism. They follow to the French symbolist poets and the real lives they also write. Theme of religion and mysticism. Eliot is also a poet of religion and mysticism. He has given stress on the Bhagavad Gita and also different Upanishads, Indian Upanishads. He has also established in his poetry, and different mysticism has introduced. Then a critical study on nature. Nature is always part of the literature. You cannot say nature is away from literature. Where is literature? There is nature. So without nature, literature cannot sustain. So that is the background of literature. So any writer, any age, they always write about the stress on the nature. Present day writers, they are writing about how to save the environment, or the, you say that weather forecast, or the save the weather, or anything, the different messages they are giving. Plantation, they are also giving messages through writing the poems on related to trees, forest, plants, etc. Involvement and spirit of romantic elements. Modern poets are full of disillusionment, I told, pessimism, I told. Still, then, there is the element of romantic elements. Romantic poetry is full of love, nature, and the modern poets also write about love and nature. Love is one of the inspiration for the poets to write the poetry. Then the spirit of revolt. So any year, so when you transfer to one period to another period, so definitely there is a revolt, there is a change, there is a transformation of the period. So modern age, that is a transformation. How they transform, they present the real life world into the people, the public, the what the problem they face. Generally, the modern age is the age of industrialization, materialistic world, and the development of uh, people, the development of the people's life. But here, still then the literature is there. Literature is just like the spirit of revolution that invites emotion and send emotion to the minds of the readers and the poets. Then the treatment of love. Love is there, love was there. So starting from the ancient time, or you say the Vedic time to the present time, love is a very significant thing. So here the T.S. Eliot has also used the theme of love in his poetry. In the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, there is also treatment of love. In the Westland, also there is a treatment of love. And this is all about the chief characteristic of modern poetry. Now, periods of Eliot's poetry. Eliot's poetry career can be divided into 5 periods. So, first period, 1905 to 1909, that is the experimental period or the creative period. During this period, the T.S. Eliot wrote poetry for the school magazines or college magazines. That is the tender age, or that is the creative age or experimental period. So the poems are not so much important, but he was the creative talent is exposed from this period. The second period, that is 1909 to 1917, this period is the urban poetry, and this is the very significant period of his life. In this period, he wrote a book of verse, volume of poems, Prufrock and other observation, that is 1917. And here, the important poems include the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, Portrait of a Lady, the Preludes, Rhapsody on a Windy Night. This is in the second period. In the third period, 1918 to 1925, that is the impact of modernism. That is the most significant period of his life, because the World War is over, First World War is over. The impact of the World War has played a vital role in the all over the London, all over the Europe, all over the world also. So during that time, he was in London and he wrote the poem Joronson, the Westland, the Hollow Man, the most disillusioned poem that he wrote. Then in the fourth period, that is the religious and Christian period, in this period, he has turned into a religious poet. He wrote Ash Wednesday, Journey of the Magi, Annie Miller, Marina, Corillanos. Then in the fifth period, that is in that period, that is the 1935 to 1943. This is a philosophical period. In this period, he wrote a long poem for which he is very much well known and popular. The title of the poem is Four Quarters. This poem consists of four sections: Burnt Norton, East Coker, Dry Salvages, and Little Gidding. Come to the next. So here there are some selected poems of T.S. Eliot, early poems, A Fable for Feastin, 1905, If Space and Time, as Caesar say, 1907, Circle's Palace, 1908, On a Portrait, 1910. He has contributed for school and college magazines. That is, a formative, tender age, or creative talent is exposed in this period. In the second, Prufrock and Other Observation, 1917, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, 1915, Preludes. Then poems, another volume, 1920. In that volume, he wrote Gerontion, Whispers of Immortality. The Westland was published in 1922. The Hollow Man was published in 1925. Then the Ariel poems, that is 1927 to 1954. In these Ariel poems, he include Journey of the Magi, 1927, A Song for Simon, 1928, Annie Muller, 1929, Marina, 1930, Trimple March, 1931, The Cultivation of Christmas Trees, that is 1954. Then Ash Wednesday, 1930, Four Quarters, 1943. These are the selected poems of T.S. Eliot. So now you come to the career of the T.S. Eliot. As a poet, he is not only concentrated on poetry, but also concentrated on drama, literary essays, and social essays. Apart from this, he is involved with the publishing works. So he is also involved with different jobs. Eliot did not pursue a systematic career. He was employed as a teacher, as a bank employee, and in the US Navy in 1918. So he worked as a teacher, bank officer, as well as defense. Then, as a publishing worker, he worked as an assistant editor of the Egoist, 1917 to 1919. Worked as the editor of The Criterion, 1920 to 1939. Then finally the director of Favor and Favor till the death. So he worked in three publishers. One is the Egoist, the Criterion, and the Favor and Favor. Then finally, Eliot declared himself. This is the line he declared himself. No category, but he himself declared what he declared. He was a classicist in literature. As a classicist, he was learning Latin literature and Greek literature vigorously and very carefully and very critically. And a royalist in politics, he was also involved in politics as well as Anglo-Catholic in religion. He's a religious fellow. So he unanimously declared that he was a classicist in literature, royalist in politics, and Anglo-Catholic in religion. Next. So now this is the theory of impersonality in poetry. This is the title of my presentation. Theory of impersonality in poetry. So what do we mean by theory of impersonality? That is the most important question that is arises. So Eliot's impersonal theory of poetry is that the poet, the man, and the poet, the artist, are two different entities. The poet has no personality of his own. He submerges his own personality, his own feelings and experiences into the personality and feelings of subject of his poetry. This idea is taken from Tradition and Individual Talent that he has written in 1917. So he contradicts to the romantic theory of poetry. So this theory of impersonality contradicts to the romantic theory of poetry, because romantic theory of poetry is the subjectivity. All romantic literature is subjective. It is an expression of the inner urges of the soul of artist. The poet gives free expression to his feelings, emotions, experiences, thoughts, and ideas, and does not care for rules and regulations. The emphasis is laid on inspiration and intuition. For example, William Wordsworth has given a famous definition of poetry. He told that poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. It takes origin from emotion recollected in tranquility. But this idea T.S. Eliot contradicts. He said that a poet has no personality at all. He summons his personality, the poet's personality, his ideas or emotions is included in a subject of his poetry. That is why in all his poetry, he never gives emphasis to himself, never gives emphasis to his own personality. Rather, he emphasizes his subjects. How he emphasizes subjects, we'll discuss later on in different poetry. Come to the next. So now, origin of theory of impersonality. The topic of a study owes its origin essentially to Eliot's theory of depersonalization or impersonality, enunciated in his seminal essay, Traditional Individual Talent, published in 1917. Needless to say that this essay ushers in a new era in modern critical theories and paves the ground for the succeeding generation of critics, especially the new critics. The essay can be divided into two parts. The first part defining tradition, the essay can be divided into three parts. The first part, definition of tradition and the relation of the individual poet to the past, and the second part focus on the attention of theory of impersonality of poetry, and the final part is the concluding part or the summing part. So unfortunately I have written it two parts, that is actually three parts. Being an advocate of the theory of impersonality, Eliot employs devices like allusions, imageries, ironies, and symbols to heighten his poetic effort. So this is the origin of theory of impersonality. I have already told that he has also two more theories. One is unification of sensibility and objective of correlativity. Unification sensibility he has drawn from metaphysical poets, and objective correlative from the problem of Hamlets. But this is not the area of the presentation. Only the area of presentation, the theory of impersonality. But I told other two theories that he has contributed also. Next. So now the textual line is not visible. Let me read out the textual line. So where he has quoted, no poet, no artist of any art has his complete meaning alone. His significance, his apprehension is the appreciation of his relation to the dead poets and artists. You cannot value him alone. You must set him for contrast and comparison among the dead. I mean this as a principle of aesthetic, not merely historical criticism. It is pertinent to note that Eliot has established his views that the poet and the poem are two separate things, and the feeling or emotion or vision resulting from the poem is something different from the feeling or emotion vision of the mind of the poet. This he elucidates by examining first the relation of the poet to the past, and next the relation of the poem to its poet. He argues that the past is never dead. It leaves the present and becomes something substantial to it. If we approach a poet with an open mind, we shall often find that not only the best but the most individual parts of his work may be those in which dead poets, his ancestors, assert their immortality most vigorously. Come to the next. So now we have to discuss the individual poems. We have to evaluate, critically analyze the individual poems of T.S. Eliot. At the outset, I will discuss about the first place. I will discuss about the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock that is written in 1915. So let me tell you about the epigraph of this poem is a 6-line quotation from Canto 27 of the Inferno by the Renaissance Italian poet Dante Alighieri. The love song J. Alfred Prufrock 1915 is an ironical poem. The title is romantic, but the treatment is really anti-romantic. If you read about the title, you feel that is a romantic poet, but actually it is an anti-romantic poet. I will explain you. It is suggestive of the fragmentation of modern man who always find himself in a state of dilemma. The modern age, the people are always in confusion, in doubtful, in a dilemma. What to do this or to do that, this or that, here or thither, hither or thither, right or wrong. So they are in confused state. So Prufrock is a typical modern man who conscious but conscious of nothing. Sometimes he is conscious, sometimes he is not conscious because he is in doubtful. He lacks courage to act. He has no courage. He only takes diligence in postponing his section. He never does his works and he always postpone because he is afraid to do the work. A single minute is sufficient for his to take decision and go for revision of his decision. The motive of the poem has been brought home through an aging romantic Prufrock who has fallen in love with a young beauty. This poem is an example of the richest in texture and poetic insight. Hence, the more frustration, unfulfilled desire, and finally unexpected love is really the distress to the human being like Prufrock. Let me explain you the poem's detail. So let me read out some of the lines of the poem, and then I will explain you. At the outset, the beginning of the poem, the poet has written, "Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky, like a peasant etherized upon a table." So, how beautifully the poet has written, "Let us go then, you and I." Who is you? You means the romantic self of Prufrock and the inner voice of Prufrock. Who is I? The realistic self of Prufrock. So, the realistic self of Prufrock and the romantic self of Prufrock, let's go. Both of them go. Where? When the evening is spread out against the sky, like a peasant etherized upon a table. This is a simile. The poet has used, at the beginning, the poet has used a simile. Just like a doctor, when he treats the patient, he makes him, gives him anesthesia to make him paralysis, and they performs the duty. Similarly, when the sky covered, when the evening approaches, the sky is dull, the activity is dull. So in that time, the Prufrock says his romantic self and his realistic self moves forward. So who is a Prufrock? Prufrock is a middle-aged person. So this poem is an ironical poem. The title is romantic, but the treatment is anti-romantic. It is not at all romantic. It is an anti-romantic poem. It is suggestive of the fragmentation of the modern man who always finds himself in a state of dilemma. For him, the charming evening is like a peasant etherized upon a table. He has lost his personal identity by becoming an ant in an anthill and a specimen in the crowd. He has become an automaton, lives in a futile life. So, Prufrock is a typical modern man who is sometimes conscious and sometimes unconscious. He has no courage to express his love to his beloved, to his sweetheart. Only so that is why the poet has used a line, "Do I dare," in the middle of the poem, because the Prufrock has not the courage to express his love before his beloved. And Prufrock wants to have an affair. He is not attracted by the whole self, but by the fragmented parts of the woman's body. The poet describes one line, "I have known the arms a lady known from them all, arms that are braceleted and white and bare. That is line 62 and 63. The poet has described about this. So the Prufog is a very coward, and he is not expressing his feelings, wishes, and love to his beloved. Prufog compares himself with Grace responsible and intends to play different roles, but ultimately disclaims the role. He is fully conscious but incapacity. In a vision, he sees his bad head brought up in a platter. So the poet has used a allusion platter. What is the platter here? This is an allusion here. The poet here, Eliot seems to refer to a story from the Bible, according to which John the Baptist was beheaded at the command of King Herod. His head was brought in upon a platter to Salome, a dancing girl of King Herod's court. This makes him afraid of death. He himself confesses his fear of death. So, Prufog is not only a coward, but also he operates to the death also. Then there is another allusion the poet has used. Prufog finally assumes the role of the Prince Hamlet. Everybody has studied about the tragedy Hamlet, Shakespeare's tragedy Hamlet. So there is a scene. The Hamlet says that to be or not to be. So to be or not to be, that is a dialogue that is told by the Hamlet. So Hamlet is confused to do this or not to do this. So like this, Eliot highlights Hamlet, the Prince of Denmark, here of Shakespeare tragedy. So Prufrock seems to be reminded of a Hamlet because of his own state of indecision. But he becomes conscious of his being an ordinary person. Here he says, I am not Prince of Hamlet. He is not the Prince of Hamlet. Prufrock is more conscious. So like this, so then the poet says that always he is active, sensitive, emotional, but when he comes forward, he is just reverse. So in heart, expresses emotion and sentiment and feelings. That is why it is an anti-romantic poem. It is not at all a romantic poem. Then you come to the next poem, that is Preludes. After the love song is Alfred Prufrock, that is Preludes. Preludes, next poem, Preludes. So, Preludes is a set of 4 poems composed in 54 lines. Its 4 parts are uneven, irregular, and written in pre-verse, symptomatic of the speaker's stream of consciousness. It is in tone literal and impressionistic, exploring the sordid and solitary existences of the spirituality moiled as they play out against the backdrop of the drab modern city. So this poem is divided into 4 parts. In the first part, the poet describes the very description of the winter evening, which is anti-romantic. It is a realistic and objective presentation of the seamy aspects of the modern life and is marked through the affected consciousness of the poetic persona, who is a typical modern man. In the second part, he describes it a morning in a city. In the third part, he has a greater complexity of tone and feeling. It displays a spiritual bankruptcy by defining man's life full of thousand sordid images. Part 4 has a religious overturn. The soul of the street lies straight across the skies that fade behind a city block. Let me go through the poem very details. So, Prelude displays a graphic picture of a modern urban city street in all the unromantic squalor, monotony, boredom, and horror. It is a collection of 4 poetic compositions despite the interval in composition. It consists of a unit of imagery, theme, and technique. The poem starts with the sordid description of a winter evening, which is compared with the burnt out ends and smoky days. The presence of the smell of sticks in passageways makes it more unpleasant. Further, the evening is associated with violent wind and showers of rain. The strong wind carries away grimy scraps, withered leaves, newspapers from vacant lots. The showers produce a typical unrhythmic sound on the broken blinds and chimney pots. At the corner of the street, a lonely cab horse steam stamps. So, in the second part, the poet describes a morning in a city. The morning is full of stale smells of beer. It represents the people who took liquor in the last night and danced in the masquerades. In the morning, they are reminded of well furnished rooms, wine, and women. While going to the coffee stands, they trample sawdust with their feet. The description of the morning is realistic in nature. The people represent the degradation and depravity of the city life, a total negation of spiritualism. The images such as masquerades, furnished rooms, coffee stands highlights the mechanical, routine-oriented, materialistic life of the city dwellers, devoid of rest and novelty. So, in the third part, the poet has a greater complexity of tone and feeling. It displays the spiritual bankruptcy by the definition of man's life, full of thousands of sordid images. Sorry. It describes a woman who hears the chirping and twittering of sparrows in the gutters while curling the papers from his hair with her sordid hands. The woman who has such a vision of the street is an instance of dedoublement. There is a sharper distinction between the perceiving consciousness and the objects of perception, between the person's vision of the street and the street itself. So, in the fourth part, he has described a religious overtone. The soul of the street lies straight across the skies that fade behind a city block. The soul of the street is trampled by instant fate. At 4 and 5 and 6 o'clock, the people smoke pipes and read newspapers. Their eyes are assured of certain certainties. The conscience of the blackened street is impassioned to assume the responsibility of the world. The notion of some infinitely gentle, infinitely suffering thing is a comprehensive perception of the images around which the poet's fancies are curled and in the soul of constituted by the images. It also reminds us of the suffering of Christ to redeem the sin of mankind. So overall, I can say that Preludes is the description of a urban life, city life, desolate life. This is described in this poem. Let us come to the next poem, that is Jeron's Son. So, Jeron's Son. So here, the name means a little old man. He is a shadowy symbol and spokesman of the sensitive intellectual in this world. He is the parody of the modern man who is deprived of morality and sexual potency. He is the parody of, sorry, this line is repeated. He consoles himself with a precautionary advice. The birth of Christ is conceived of as opening a new era within which the cycle of civilization symbolized by Jeron's Son is very near its end. Let me explain the details of the poem. The poem Jeron's Son symbolizes a civilization founded on material values and secular rationalism with no religious communion or human sense of community, a nightmare world of isolation and instability, of restless nervous and intellectual activity, of emotional stagnation and spiritual drought. Jeron's Son is the shadowy symbol of spokesman of the sensitive intellectual in this world. He is a parody of the modern man who is deprived of morality and sexual potency. His house is a ruined house, and he himself is a dim-witted person. House is completely destroyed, and he lives in a dim-witted places. He is dissociated from his own sensory world, and this monologue is filled with self-dramatization and self-deception. So the person is really disappointed and expresses feelings to us. He presents himself in a landscape transformed by his own desolation, a psychological terrain where things he once loved have cooled, diminished, and turned into inconvenience. He urges himself insistently to think now, but he has no desire to think. And his refrain is only a substitute for thought. He consoles himself with a precautionary advice. Jeronson turned his world into a fairyland of his own desires. It is a place where cool sands can be worn by hot gates and warm rain, but his fairyland is only the first circle of hell. As he projects his fate on the doom of a bird in a storm, his resigned with withdrawal rises to the full height of sadness. So the poem uses different types of images. The mood of the poem recognizes the intimate relationship between sex and religion. So here, modern poetry is full loaded with sex and religion. The antithesis is between human life conceived in a framework of myth and the lack of all meaning in contemporary secularism. The general context of the myth becomes specifically that of Christianity. The birth of Christ is conceived of as opening a new era within which the cycle of civilization symbolized by Jeronson is very near its end. So Jeronson sees one aspect of Christ, Jesus Christ, as the tiger, but is incapable of drawing and vitality from entering into any communion with the element source of juvenescence. So this is all about the poem Jeronson. Now let's come to the Westland. The Westland is composed in 1925. This is one of the important noteworthy poem of T.S. Eliot. This poem is written in 434 lines. The entire poem is divided into 5 parts. First part is the burial of the dead. Second one, a game of chess. Third one, the fire sermon. Fourth one, death by water. Fifth one, what the thunder said. What are the theme and structure of the Westland? So, a study and criticism of life and society, theme of contemporary disintegration. The poem exposes anxiety, despair, boredom, and mental vacuity of the modern era. So, the theme of sex, perversion, a relationship, particularly of the typist and the clerk instance, is given through the poem. The study of life in death, then follow the unit of structure. Now, let me explain the details about the poem. So, let me discuss. The Westland is one of the outstanding poems of the modernist literature. In this poem, the poet sheds light upon the futility, anarchy, and miasma of modern life. The poem stands out dazzlingly modern in themes and thematic patterns. Eliot does not criticize the actual world as a satirist does, but creates a surreal world of sterile lust, timidity, and envy on which he fixes his gaze with feelings of mesmerizing horror. So, the impact of how he wrote the poem, the impact of the First World War and its after effect must have given the poet an impulse to complete the poem The Westland. So, the World War and the glimpses of it gave the people suffering and courage, led to heightening his poetic power, awakened him to the futility, horror, and boredom beneath human existence, and the Westland was the result. It is a poem which reflects the post-war struggle for reorientation. So after the World War, the whole London, all the whole world is devastated. Everybody is desolated. Everybody is disappointed. In that critical time, he wrote this poem. He is also suffering from a disease. He was not ill. So this poem is a combination of illness of his own as well as the illness of the world. That is why the poet's illness is also considered one of the factors behind the origin of the Westland. Eliot wrote the work not merely under the influence of war and London, but also under the stress of illness. It is a poem in which the poet expresses simultaneously about his own illness and the world's illness, of which his own is a reflection. The possibility of spiritual rebirth is a constantly recurring theme in the poem. The presence of sterile degeneration and the necessity of regeneration and change in the general truth is the real central theme. The technique and mode of expression in the poem, the very fragmented technique he has used in this poem. So the poem is based on the myths or the legends. We say that legend of the Grail and the Fisher Cake legend. So where he got this idea? When Eliot was writing the Westland, he had been reading two important mythical anthropologies. One is Jesse Weston's From Ritual to Romance and James Fraser's The Golden Bough. Miss Meston's books supplied him with the legend of the Grail and the Fisher King. So, as the Fisher King was suffering, so as he was suffering from a disease and he was desolate, he was feeling hopeless. Similarly, after the World War, the whole world is suffering. There is nothing in this world, only disappointment. So, enter the legend tells of the dead earth restored by the magic of human lovemaking. It tells us a land which has been blighted by a curse, so that it is arid, waterless, producing neither animal nor vegetable. The whole world is not able to produce any animal or any vegetables. The world is arid and sterile. So, the title of the poem, The Westland, is completely justified. The plight of the land is linked with that of the ruler of the Fisher King. The Fisher King life is compared with the world after the World War life, who is a resultant of illness of a wound, has become sexually important. So the Fisher King was sexually important after the wound, after suffering by disease. Similarly, the whole world is suffer after the First World War. Then, now you come to the poem analysis part by part. The opening section entitled here in this poem, you say that the thought and use of symbolism and images in the Westland. The Westland poem is loaded with Indian thought, is applicable in the poem. And it is also influenced by Buddhist philosophy, influenced by Brihadaranyaka Upanishads. He has used three syllable, one syllable, Sanskrit syllable, da for data, da for dayadhama, da for damyata. Data means donate. Dayadha means sympathy. Damyata means control, self-control. Then the glimpses of the Rig Veda, use of the medieval legends, the symbol of Tyreses. Let me explain the section wise. So the opening section entitled The Burial of the Dead refers to the burial of the fertility of the god. It develops the death theme of the god and man and relates to fear of its sex. Ironically, the poem begins with the life-giving rain, which is longed for in part of 5. There is a resurgence of life in the Westland, but the rebirth is painful after the oblivion of winter. The people of the Westland are not made happy by the return of spring of fruitfulness to the soil. They prefer the barrenness of winter or the dead season. At the beginning of the poem, the poet has written 5 lines. April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. Winter kept us warm, covering earth in forgetful snow, feeding a little life with dried tubes. Summer separates us. So the above lines speak eloquently of the cyclic nature. There is a revival and a renewability of life. On the whole, the first part of the poem is concerned with themes of death and resurrection. So now you come to the second part. The second section, a game of chess, suggests a negation of romantic love. For Westlanders, marriages mean a chessboard, a mere device for the gratification of sensual appetite. Sex has become a part of life, and the superficial pursuit of pleasure that has resulted in an unbearable boredom. The game of chess becomes a symbol of the empty life. When the mind is exercised on petty consideration and the eyes are fixed languidly and helplessly on the move and counter move of the game, intellectual as well as sexual, and the weary heart waits for some violence, which may knock this life to pieces of death itself, which may put an end to this stale and aimless existence. The chess game symbolizes the prolonged idea of seduction. So, in the next, the third section, the fire sermon was preached. The fire sermon, this poem is continuing. The third section, the fire sermon was preached with Buddha against the fire of passion, hatred, and infatuation. In this section, Eliot shows that Water in the modern Westland is a negative element, a river of lust. Water has lost its proper efficacy. It has become malignant. The section begins with an autumn scene and exposes the contamination of the river Thames. In the fourth section, that is death by water, brings the Phoenician sailor and the ultimate consequence of the last theme of the fire. In this part, the emphasis is on death and not on the hope of rebirth into a new life. So Phelps parodises the resurrection of fertility of God as he moves back in time through the stages of his age and youth. In the fifth section, what the thunder said is the essence of the whole poem. It shows the way released from the spiritual barrenness of the lustful world. The suffering described in the fire sermon in the world repentance, that is last section, indicates. So Eliot refers to the significant episode that is Brihandaranyank Upanishad. This poem is also influenced by Upanishad, which describes how a moment of doubt and confusion, men, gods, and demons approached Prajapati, the giver of all wisdom, for guidance. In answer to their prayer, the divine teacher uttered in thunder only one Sanskrit syllable, da, 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 which each group interpreted in its own peculiar way. Data, Dayadhama, Damyata. Data means give, Dayadha means sympathy, Dayadha means sympathy, and Damyata means control. Then, so overall, I can say that overall, let me say, this is a poem of criticism of life and study of contemporary disintegration of sexual perversion. According to Clint Brooks, the theme of the Westland is life in death. It suggests the life, living death of the inhabitation of the Westland. So throughout the poem, it is evident that the man is shown to have lost his passion, that is, his faith in God and religion. His passional participation in religion and this decay of faith has resulted in the loss of vitality, both spiritual and emotional. Consequently, the life in the modern Westland is life in death. That is why winter is welcome to them and April is the cruelest month. In spite of the fragmentary passages, there is an organic unit in the structure of the Westland. The different parts are connected with one another by psychological ties. These 5 points are very, very important that I am going to tell you. In the burial of the dead, Tyreese suggests that the soul of the dead are buried under the thoughts, the words and the deeds of sensualism, unholy love and fraud. Then in a game of chess, the protagonist suggests that the modern materialistic woman looks upon life as a game of chess in which she is playing with a man to keep him under his power till another lover lurks at the door. So in the third part, the fire sermon, he suggests that the modern man is burning in fire of sexual love. In Death by Water, he suggests that the money-minded can never cross the ocean of worldly riches, the ocean of mirage. They shall be drowned in mid-ocean. In What the Thunder Said, he suggests that man can save himself by choosing the path of Data, Dayadama, and Damyata. The first two will make his soul noble and will fit it with love for man and God. Damyata, self-control of the mind and the senses, will enable him to conquer sensualism, unholy love, fraud, and love for the world. This is all about the Westland. As it is a long poem, I took very much time. Then you come to the Hollow Man, next poem, the Hollow Man. So the Hollow Man is composed in 1925, brings out the hollowness and shallowness of modern world. Hollow men are the specimen of modern men who are neither happy nor sad, neither living nor dead. The poem begins with, we are the hollow men, we are the steeped men, leaning together, headpiece filled with straw. The poem ends with the repetition of the lines that is highly suggestive and meaningful. How the poet ended with the same sentence. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but with a whimper. So let us explain this poem. The Hollow Man brings out the hollowness and shallowness of the modern world. It dramatizes the barrenness of the modern world, which is directly exposed in the Westland. It reflects Eliot's doubt and complete at their highest point of intensity. Hollow men are the specimens of modern men who are neither happy nor sad, neither living nor dead. So the hollow men describe themselves as the effigies of the old guy stopped with straw. They gather and lean together, but they have no initiative, no vision. So that is all about the hollow men. Now you come to the next poem, the four quartets. T.S. Eliot is very much popular for writing this poem at the last part of his poetic career. So he wrote the four quartets. This is a philosophical poem. He wrote this poem, he divided this poem in four parts. So first part is Burnt Norton, that he describes about the air. Second part is the East Cover, that describes about the earth. Third one is the dry salvages, that describes about water. And the fourth one is the Little Reading, that describes about the fire. So four quartets consist of the number of four poems. So it is the Eliot's masterpiece. It is the mature achievement of a poet who was in a long period of experiment, affected a modification and an enrichment of the whole poetic tradition. We may be justified in saying that it is the nearest and most successful approach to the meaning that Eliot wanted to communicate. So each of the four poems takes its title from different places and experiences. As it is a very long poem, it is not possible to describe one by one. So that is why I told you the overall image of this poem. So please come to the next. So now you come to the Ariel poems. So the Ariel poems are two series of pamphlets that contain illustrated poems published by Faber and Geyer and later by Faber and Faber. The first series had 38 poem titles published in 1927 and 1931. The second series, published in 1954, had 8 titles. T.S. Eliot Ariel poems are. T.S. Eliot's Ariel poems are The Journey of the Magi, A Song for Simon, so Song for Simon. Then next one is Animal and the Marina. So in The Journey of the Magi, the poet described the terrible condition through which the Magi traversed to meet the Christ child after his birth. The poem begins with the speaker listing out all the troubles he and his men faced on their way to the manner in which Christ was born. In the second poem, A Song of Simon, Simon is an old and devout Jew of Jerusalem, waiting for the arrival of the Messiah. He has been told by the Holy Ghost that he is not to die until he has seen Christ. And he has been guided to the temple where the child Jesus had been taken by his parents. Experience is translated partly into traditional Christian symbols and partly private creations. The mingling of the abstract and concrete characterize the beginning images. The death of Simon, who has seen the salvation, becomes the symbol of the renewable death that may be experienced by all. The poem is a Christian expression of the paradoxical life that comes through death. In Animula, he describes how animals, especially a cat, goes about their daily routine of living without annoying. This is the direct contrast to the struggle of humanity that goes through in their efforts to survive in this critical and cruel world. Marina. This poem explores the theme of death of the old self and the birth of the new self. The change is both dreaded and desired. It is perceived in terms that mingle strangeness and familiarity. This is all about the Ariel poems. Now you come to the conclusion. Eliot was accolade the highest honor in the literary world, both in England and in America. The age of T.S. Eliot is an age of tremendous literary activity. However, the rapid growth of science and materialism and deification of machine had brought about a commercialization of art, literature, and music. So the modern age is rightly branded as the commercial age of the world. To Eliot, a poem is like an organism with a life of its own. Poetry is a criticism of life. It must maintain its contact with life. Modern poetry is the reflection of modern life. It is realistic in tone and expresses the spirit of the age. In modern age, poetry can be written on almost any topic. Modern poets do not belong to a single recognizable group. So, to sum up, I would like to say that T.S. Eliot is a popular poet in the world. He has presented his poems very carefully and very critically. Not only the scholars, academicians, students, and also the critics appreciated to his poetry. He has presented love poems, he has presented philosophical poem, he has presented religious poem, he has presented war poem, effect of the war poems, and also the theme of his poem is modernism. So this is all about the T.S. Eliot, how the T.S. Eliot has employed, has used his theory of impersonality in his poetry. That's all. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for the wonderful presentation. It was very detailed, and we are so happy to listen you. So now, guys, we are moving towards another part, which is question answer session. So if you have questions regarding this whole presentation, you may ask from the speaker. Please write your questions in chat box. And people were asking for the slides. They can email us. We will send the slides. I'm sharing our email. This is our email, and you can email us, and we will send the slides of the topic. After this session, I will share the feedback form link, which you have to fill.
Okay. Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are.
Uh, Am I audible clearly?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So there is a question uh, from Moses Ali. So the participant has raised a very beautiful question for me. In what ways would you say your work reflects the theory of impersonalization? In what ways? So the participant has raised a very key question for me. This is a very nice question. So let me explain to this question. So first, try to understand what is the impersonalization. That's this term, personalization and impersonalization. So when a poet writes a poem, generally He writes subjective poetry. He writes about his own feelings, own emotions, own sentiments, and he expresses his personality through his poetry. Take the one example that any romantic poet, they have the tendency to write the love poem, nature poem, mystic poem. But here, T.S. Eliot is writing the poetry of theory of impersonality. Here, the poet, what he wants to present it through his poetry, not his personality, but he expresses the poems, the subjects. He summers his subjects, his themes, his ideas, his experiences through his poetic career. So, for example, take his example, the love song J. Alfred Prufrock. So here the character is Prufrock, modern age man, modern age bald man. So the poet describes about the whole modern people, how they are in the stage of dilemma and confusion. Not describing about his own feelings, describing about the all modern age people, how the modern age people are in the dilemma, in confusion, in doubtful. As the Prufrock. Prufrock is a expresses his romantic attitude, but the poem is the treatment of poem is anti-romantic. It is not romantic at all. So he wants to express his love, but he is not expressing love. He is desirous, but he cannot express it. Sometimes he is conscious, but is not express his views. Just like a crab, you know that crab, the crab goes forward and backward. So modernist people are like that. They are in the dilemma. They are in the confusion. So they are not personalized. They are impersonalized. They are objective oriented, and they express their views in through their poems, through the submerges. This is one of the poems. So if you think about the hollow men, in the hollow men, the poet here describes in this poem, the hollow men refers to the shadow men, the dull men of ours. That means the modern people, all the modern people are dull, shallow, empty. They are desolate. They have nothing to do. Just like that, you have seen a scarecrow. The scarecrow is a dummy fellow. So similarly, the poet exposes his creations, his poems through in a impersonalized manner. I hope that you understood this question. You are satisfied with this answer. So, so next question from Azhar Hussein. Sir, how T.S. Eliot poetry is different from Geoffrey Chaucer's poetry? May you give some arguments? Okay, so your question is a very comparative study. So, father of poetry to the modern poetry. So, very technically, very innovatively, you have presented this question for me. Very technically. So, when you read about Geoffrey Chaucer, you study about the old poems. So, the Canterbury Tales, or you say that you read about their old stories, old poems that you read. So, we say that that is he's the father of the poetry. In that time, what happens? The people based on the philosophy, religion, morality, and ethics. The people. That time is the age of the religion. That time is the age of believing the God. That time is the believing the supreme power. So Geoffrey Chaucer emphasizes on these aspects of the life. So he develops his poetry in this way. But when you come to the 20th century modern age poetry, in the modern age poetry, people are very much mechanical, industrious, and also busy in their works schedule. That is why they say that just like that, no one, nowhere, leisure, there is a poem leisure, no one has time to stand and stare to look at the beauty of the nature. Similarly, you say that in the T.S. Eliot's poetry, we say that the world is devastated, desolate, alienated, and we are searching for hope from there. We are searching for hope. We are searching for resurrection. We are searching for philosophical ideas. We are searching for religious tendencies. So the people must have a strong faith in religion. The people must have a strong faith in God, the supreme power. But in the earlier time, in Chaucer's time, what happened? Already that ethics was there. Morality, ethics, religion, or you say that philosophical ideas are within the minds of the human beings. But in the present era, in the 20th century, because T.S. Eliot belongs to 20th century, now we are the 21st century, that's the different issue. In the 20th century, the T.S. Eliot is very much hopeful and struggling to get to how the religion, how the God, how the supreme power, and the belief in the philosophy and the mystic and the social life will be restored by this in this modern world. I hope this answer will satisfy to your this answer will be the up to your expectation. So the next question came from Brad MK. How can teacher adapt T.S. Eliot poetry and teach to EFL re-intermediate and intermediate students? So, dear participant, you have raised a very practical based question. Generally, you have put me into establish a real life situation. I have to come to a real life classroom, a real life situation. That is the tendency. So when you teach about the T.S. Eliot poetry in intermediate or intermediate students, so you say that in the up to +2 level or undergraduate level, you say that, or you say that in the 10th level, school level also. So you have to teach very small poems. You have to teach. We are not supposed to teach the long poems like the Four Quartets or the Westland or the Hollow Man or the Love Songs of Alfred Popok. So we have to teach them the small poems, and we have to tell about them only the specific characteristics of modern age, specific 3 to 4 characteristics of modern age only. Why the modern age is the sufferer, why the people in the modern age are the best sufferer. Only a key line, you have to tell the background of the modern age, 3 to 4 sentences you tell, and you tell about 4 to 5 sentences the background of the T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot was an American British poet. He devoted his time America and Britain also. Then you have to describe about his theme of his poetry. What is the theme of his poetry? The theme of his poetry is to contemporary world, struggle in the contemporary world. Suppose you said struggle in the contemporary world. You have to explain what is contemporary world and what are the struggles, what are the difficulties in the contemporary world the people are facing nowadays. You have to explain to them. Then the students will also predict you will extract from the students what the students are telling to you. Then you say that T.S. Eliot belongs to this time. So then you raise the question, students, have you read about the history? Then students will say yes. So in the First World War, you tell me, who can tell me about so many lines of the First World War? So if someone said about the First World War, then you know what is the situation of the world in the First World War? The people are disappointed, disillusionment, desolate. Then you can say that modern poetry is full of desolate, disillusionment, and struggling. So you have to take only the small poems. You cannot take the long poem, Four Quarters or the Westland into their level. And you should be interactive. In an intermediate classroom, the teacher must be a facilitator and interactive and try to extract from the students something from the students. And you help the students by giving some handouts or giving some pictures on the whiteboard. You draw some pictures or bullet marks or keywords you have to write. So I do hope this idea will incorporate you or help you to develop or utilize in your classroom. So next question from Salazar. How can you use T.S. Eliot's poetry in harmonious phenomenological study? How can theory of impersonality circumvent the entirety of narrative? So when you think about, so let me explain you about the narrative technique and impersonality. So how can you use TSL poetry in, okay, let us see phenomenological study. So when you think about the narrative technique, so first of all, you have to understand what is a narrative. Narrative means So generally this term is used in novel. A novelist narrate the story. The novelist narrate the story. But the poet establishes his point of view and analyzes his critical appreciations of a poem. But when you say that impersonality, as this term is taken from an essay, so this narrative technique is applicable. So the theory of impersonality is taken from his essay, seminal essay, The Tradition of Individual Talent. That essay is divided in three parts. The first part is concept of tradition, second part is theory of impersonality, and third part is the concluding part. So your question is, how can you use the T.S. Eliot poetry in phenomenological study? So when you think about impersonality theory, objective, you impersonally, you judge a poem, you critically analyze a poem, any poem, you can critically analyze. Suppose you think about the poem Prelude. So when you judge about a prelude poem, first of all, you see how the prelude poem is very significant. Because this poem is significant because it is narrated about a urban doll life. Urban doll life. This is described. So generally, the poets are writing about the rural life. When the poets write about the rural life, that is a very charming and attractive. When it is things about the urban life, that is a dull life. Why? Because 20th century stands for the dull life. In the specific poem, the preludes, you have to narrate how there are four time references are there. One is the evening time and the morning time, and then afternoon, and then the time. So when the time section are given in the evening time, you see that how the time is very dreadful, and how the season, how the environment is approachful. You have to narrate the evening time. You have to narrate when you have to describe. You have to explain about the morning, and very topographically you have to explain about the morning, evening, and afternoon time. Then after, you have to explain how the city life is devastated and destroyed because the people are addicted with alcohol, masquerades, dance, as well as they are involved with unpractical, irreligious works. So wherever you go in the morning, you find only beer bottles, empty beer bottles. You find dirty garbages. People are not so much conscious. So when you narrate a poem, phenomenologically, very technically, or very theoretically, you analyze a poem, you have to describe its background, you describe about its seasons or compositions and effects and its values and ethics to human beings. So this is my analysis for you. I hope that you understood and you will expect this answer very positively.
Now, guys, I'm going to share the link of the feedback form. Please write your correct name and your last name. I have sent you link in your chat box. Sir, we have a last question.
Okay. So Basma, the participant, has raised the question, put the question for me. Did T.S. Eliot takes to his theory of impersonality in his life and works? The concluding question is very interesting and very innovative also, because this question created just like a modern age man dilemma. This is also a dilemma for me. Okay. So T.S. Eliot stick to his theory impartial is a life and works. T.S. Eliot has employed, I have already told you, three techniques. One is unification of sensibility, objective of correlativity, as well as theory of impersonality in his poetry. Some of his poems he has used theory of impersonality, not all the poems. That does not mean that he will use that he has concentrated this technique in all his poems. He interpreted this technique in some of his poems very carefully, and in his work. So in his life, as you question the in his life, as he is a switchover of the job, teacher, bank officer, then navy. So he utilizes his time for different profession. He enjoys his time with the different source. So as a teacher, he takes the class and gives the views. As a bank manager, he is in the economical world. As a navy officer, he was doing the defense job. So he has a beautiful experience. But in the literary field, he is using his theory of impersonality in most of his poems. Most of his poems. That is in Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, The Hollow Man, Four Quarters, The Westland, and basically he is focused on the Westland and the Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. And the Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, in that poem, as it is an anti-romantic poem, the poet has used allusions in this poem. So the allusions like this, Platter, Lazarus, and the Prince of Hamlet used. So when he used the allusions, obviously the poet has used the theory of impersonality. Then similarly in the Westland, he used the theory of impersonality, because you know that that poem is loaded with myth, religion, Veda, as well as allusions, symbols, comparative, contemporary world, and that poem is a very fragmentary poem. And that poem, you just mark it, that poem ends with only one word, that is Santihi, Santihi, Santihi. So what is Santihi, Santihi, Santihi? This word is he has taken from Sanskrit language. Belongs to England. He was born in America, but he is focused on Indian ethics, Indian philosophy. That is, the Sanskrit is the classical language of India. He focused on that. So the theory of impersonality he used in most of his works and also in his life. This is a very beautiful question for me. Really, I got this question and I noted this question for me also. And this the wind up question is tremendous as well as very mind blowing. I hope that you accepted the answers.
So guys, I have sent you the link. I hope you all have filled out the feedback form. After this session, feedback form will be closed, and then you will not be able to fill out the form. So please fill out this form, and then you will be able to get the certificate. Guys, I'm clearly stating that please fill out this form right now. After this session, when we end this meeting, link will be closed, and then you will not be able to fill out this form, because people then come up with the some issues that they have the network issue, or they couldn't see the chat link in the chat box, and they do not get the certificate. All links are of the feedback form. Please choose one link and fill out the feedback form. We are here only for 2 minutes and then we will end this meeting. Now we are going to end this meeting. So, sir, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation and for your time. And our participants are very good, grateful to you. Okay, sir.
Thank you.
So now we are end this broadcast.
Okay.